Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Croyle, the director of the Scribe Playwriting Competition, and I would like to welcome playwrights David Don Miller and his sons John Matthew Miller and Dean Lawrence Miller. They are the full-length winners of the 2022 Scribe Playwriting Competition. So greetings, David and John and Dean, and thank you guys so much for joining us today. How are things going?
Things are going great. We're pulling out of the winter still here in on the East Coast. We live north of the Wall in New York, if you know what I mean.
North of the Wall in New York. I do.
Yeah.
I do. Could you possibly, David, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from originally, what kind of background you have, and where do you live and work today?
Yeah, I grew up in San Jose, California, and I was acting out there after I got out of undergrad with an English degree. And I said, well, if I want to get serious about this whole acting thing, I better audition for some training programs. And I got into NYU grad, and I was having some success as an actor. I was signed by an agent. I was working off Broadway and the occasional soap, and everything was going in the right direction. And I finally just got so tired of the instability that
Yeah,
I decided it wasn't for me. I was happier thinking about myself as a teacher. And so I started teaching English and drama about 18 years ago in public high schools, and I'm still doing that today. And
that's
meanwhile, I
fantastic.
thank you, missed the theater so much that I started writing plays around 2013 at the behest of artistic director of a company called New York Rep. He founded that company back then. He's no longer with them. His name's Marcus Potter. And he said to me, he's like, you taught in the Bronx for 3 years. He's like, do you got any stories? And I said, I got more stories than I know what to do with. And he said, well, why don't you write me something? Maybe I'll produce it. And I said, okay. And he produced a play about my writing, about my teaching experience in the Bronx called, the title was Why You Beasting? And we launched it at the Fringe Festival in 2013, and it really struck a chord with people. And we got invited to the Encore series, and we sold out our run, and we got a critics picked review on
Yeah.
Time Out New York, and it was very, very vindicating. Play didn't really go anywhere because they put about 19 characters in it, and every producer that looked at it just went,
Right.
but it was very vindicating. And I've been writing a lot since then, more sporadically than I would like. I was put on a team of a composer and a lyricist. We've been working on this musical called Goodbye New York for the last 8 years. I've written, and it's, the option was purchased. We got producers who are knocking on doors at regional theaters and in London as we speak, to try to get that off the ground. And I'm working on a novel, been writing short stories, got other plays in the hopper, and it's all still kind of keep your day job kind of thing. And I'm
Sure.
okay with that. Got a writing partner in LA, and we're trying to get
And a couple right there with you
yeah,
today.
a couple right here. And dangerous conversation about, well, what would it be like if we went in and just shoplifted at CVS and I got caught? Couldn't I just blame it on one of you? What would that be? Just a stupid conversation out in the parking lot one day. And before I knew it, I was like, well, guys, we can't really do that, right? Well,
Right, right.
we couldn't write about it. So it's kind of like the ultimate in vicarious thrill uh,
Sure.
to spawn that idea and say, now here's an example. So I'm trying to be a good dad. The emphasis on trying, you can exercise your wild and dangerous fantasies as a writer and leave them there. So
See, yeah, and I was just going to touch upon that, the fact that a lot of writers, including myself, we do put these vicariously scheduled moments that we have for ourselves anyway, a lot of the times in our own writing.
oh yeah.
It's a way to kind of live that without actually living it, and I think it's a great outlet as far as that's concerned.
It is. And most of the time everything I'd written was far more autobiographical with these little splashes of, oh, I would never do that. But this entire thing came from, here's a whole thing that I don't have the background of this. This is a real blue collar kind of guy. These guys are awfully smart, but I'm not sure they're quite on the level of Jasper Collins, selling an app to Apple at the age of 10. But we molded ourselves into these shapes, and we had so much fun. We're just like, it was one of that and building a treehouse kept us sane during the pandemic.
Oh, that's wonderful.
When we started it and did the bulk of the work, I'd say.
Okay, so assuming our audiences, have not read your play, the play is called It Wasn't Me. Could you give everybody a quick kind of overview of what the play is about? Yeah. And how, again, you've touched upon it, but how that developed for you, and what exactly was it about that kind of a project that you really wanted to include the boys as far as being partners in writing this piece?
Yeah, well, it's when we start with a guy who's about 30, his name's Dan Collins, and when we meet him, he's just in a stupefied state of mind. We don't know why. And he's there with his kid who's worried about, well, hey, we ran out of Cheerios and all this kind of stuff, and what's going on. And turns out that the dad just got laid off. He's a locksmith, and like the motel chain where he works just replaced the necessity for a locksmith with all kinds of swipe cards. And so he just doesn't know what he's going to do next to begin with. And then he discovers a letter on this little table that said that it's his wife, and lights up on her. She says, I'm sorry, I just can't wait any longer. I'm pushing 30. Now's my chance. And she's going west to finally try her hand at acting. And she's been burning with desire to do it. And so basically Dan is left there with his kid, Jasper. They're about to get evicted. They're really over the barrel, so to speak, financially. And the kid kind of poses it to him in a way that it's just that old-fashioned ethical dilemma of, would you steal a loaf of bread for me if I were starving? And it actually comes up in the script. And it's like, well, of course I would. Well, how is this any different? Because it's the kid who hatches this scheme. What if we just rip off stuff from CVS and basically fence it online, Amazon, eBay, whatever, and if we get caught stealing stuff, you could just blame it on me. And I'll say, it wasn't me. And you could say, well, how many times have I told you not to do this? And we'll escape. We'll get away with it. And this guy, Dan, he's a little unsophisticated in his thinking. So he can't think of a better idea. So they do it. And there is a farcical element to this. But there's also, I think, some heart and some comic falls ahead. But the kid is brilliant. He's street smart and book smart. And, bringing them in, it started because of a conversation we were having. And John was, before we came on, John was saying it was in the parking lot of the daycare center where I was picking him up, which means we first talked about this far younger than you should have been. But I remember it really forming a little bit later when we were on a road trip in 2019. We just talked more and more and more about it. And I said, well, if this kid character is going to have a big voice in this, why don't you guys help me? You already helped me come up with the premise. Why don't we do this together? Who was that guy you named, that video game character?
Sly Cooper.
Sly Cooper. I didn't know who Sly Cooper was. And he's writing this into the dialogue. They're both keeping me honest about, what a 10-year-old kid may or may not say. And we just kept on kind of shaping it together. And it was just endless fun.
Well, it's obviously apparent that you do have this intrinsic love for storytelling. Where did that originate, do you think? And do you think that you've been able to even including within this process of writing with the boys, that you've been able to share that with them. Where did that come from for you?
Well, that's a great question. I've never really pondered that, other than to say, in when I was in school, the thing that I did best with the least amount of effort was reading and writing. And so I kind of listened to that. And by the time I got to college, I went to undergrad at UC Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
I finally became an English major because it was the only thing I didn't hate. And so little by little, I discovered the theater through that. And I guess wanting to just get up in front of an audience and tell a story is the same sort of DNA that led me to,
It really is. Yeah.
I got something to say. And sometimes, like, I'll see people arguing online about something, and I'll have this momentary feeling like I want to jump in on this argument. And then I'll go, you know what? I'd rather write a 10-minute play about this than go into this argument with these
right people. Because we don't ever really change anybody's mind online. Never. But through art, sometimes we can get people to whether it's through reading something or watching something, we can get them to think about the possibility that there are other points of view, that there are other ways to look at the world. So that's pretty impressive. So John and Dean, did you guys have fun writing with your dad? Like, did you guys enjoy this process of sitting down and what did you learn most, do you think? You guys can go one at a time. What did you learn most from this process of sitting down with your dad and writing?
Mostly just like how long, like how like the smallest like stuff that like might really not matter that much, how much time that could take.
I do know, like specifics within scenes and things like that. Yeah. It's funny because a lot of times I'll introduce some people to a movie or whatever, and then I'll happen to have like a copy of the script or something, and I'll let them read the script, and they're blown away. Outside of the process, they're usually blown away that a lot of what is represented visually on the screen is on paper. And they said they really write everything, don't they? And it's like, yeah. Everything that you see starts with a script, whether it's on a stage or whether it's on a screen. Dean, how about you? What did you learn most?
This kind of goes what he said, like very obscure details we spent a long time on. Like with when they wanted to sell the stuff that they stole on Amazon, we looked into it, and Amazon, you have to pay to sell stuff, but on eBay, you get 30 days free.
Right. So you're doing your research is what you're saying. Yeah. I think it's very important. You try to make things as believable as possible. I mean, you're creating an entire world that yet you want your audience to believe in. And so those little details really do matter. They make it all the more realistic and sell it to an audience that it's a real thing. Now, David, I know a lot of writers have specific processes that they follow when they write. And I know that, I have my own, and they differ for everybody. Do you have a specific writing process that you follow from, the conception of the piece through finishing it?
Yeah, it's evolved over time. I mean, the novelists that I know, they say you're either a pantser or a plotter. And if you're a pantser, you're going by the seat of your pants.
I like that.
Plotter, you're outlining everything up front.
Right.
And I used to be, as a playwright, a total pantser. And what would happen is I would just meander my way into the universe. And by the time I captured something resembling a plot, I was like, I got 5 too many characters, 10 too many scenes.
Right.
And it's almost like being an architect.
Sure, but also at the same time, you have to think, maybe pantsing on the first draft isn't so bad, because then you can just throw everything out there and then mold it. But yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, as long as you're willing to do that work.
Sure.
And okay, this concrete foundation I just poured needs to be jackhammered, to take the analogy further. but I found that when I do structure things, and
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of a book called Save the Cat, which was primarily for
I have
screenwriting.
heard of that. Yes.
It's really terrific. I find that even if I do structure things, I leave myself a doorway out anytime it feels like, well, I don't want to create a prison for myself here. But once the structure actually is laid down, I do find it liberating to then fill in that form with kind of a free flowing thing that, you know, that I got out of being a pantser. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. You kind of have both. Otherwise, I guess I'm just getting a little too old to want to do all that extra work on the second draft, or you know, just discover that I've lost myself in the forest here, you know. So that's really
I think that's a natural progression. I think we, you know, as we start out, we kind of have to feel our way around to see what works best for us. Again, because you know everybody has a different approach to however they sit down and write on a daily basis. What was it like for you to have the boys write with you? What kind of experience was that like as a dad, as a father?
It was pure bliss, you know, because writing can normally be there's so much solitude involved, which is part of why we enjoy it. But like,
Right.
you know, when you're working with people and they're your kids, it's like this is the best of both worlds. We're having fun. You know, on a rainy day, we can't build the tree house. Let's sit here and work on this. And we're laughing, and you know, they're both fairly experienced theater actors at this point, and they create their own content for this thing they do every year at the conservatory, where they go called the Evening of One Act Plays.
Yeah.
So they already had some theater chops when we started this, and it's kind of like, even though I'm a teacher, it's kind of the family business, so to speak, to be creative like this. And it was just wall to wall fun. I want to do another one. Can we work that out with your agents?
We have agents.
You got your agent sitting right in between you guys right now.
Wearing a different hat. So it was a blast.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just reaffirming it was a total blast.
What sort of advice? So say you got the boys sitting there and they say, Dad, I want to write. I don't know where to start. What sort of advice would you have for beginning playwrights, for those that are looking for, I guess, new avenues or new ways to explore their own distinct voice?
I would say just make sure your protagonist wants something really, really badly. Start right there. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it does, but like it could be a piece of chocolate cake. And as long as you have an engine filled with fuel, human desire, and then you just start throwing obstacles in their path, something else takes over. Where before you know it, the dialogue it almost seems beyond your control when your main character is attached to a goal like that. And the other half would be, give yourself 3 bullet points, a beginning, middle, and an end of this scene or this story, if you can. If that doesn't make you feel completely constricted. If it does make you feel constricted, then just be the pantser. Be the pantser you were born to be. Make sure your character wants something badly, or else why are we paying attention? We could just sit at the mall and people watch, you know. Make them want something and go after it.
So how can everybody find your work? Do you have, are you online? Where can people find you online? That way they can familiarize themselves with
best place right now is just my Instagram, David Don Miller, or Facebook, David Don Miller. I have a website that's sort of under construction right now, but you know, maybe within a couple of weeks I'll get that back up. Those daviddonmiller.com. But I took it down for some retooling and some soul searching about what is my best foot forward on this thing. But certainly Instagram, David Don Miller. I'm there a lot.
Okay. Well, again, I'd like to thank you, David, also John and Dean, for being with us today. The play is called It Wasn't Me. I wish you guys much success with your future work. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for submitting this year, and also just taking the time to sit down with me and talk today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. It's a huge honor. It's a beautiful way that you're honoring Marcia. It's really
Thank you.
meaningful to us to be a part of that.
I really appreciate that.